What's going on, everyone? Today we have the final set 16 tier list. So there are a couple of changes this patch. They buffed a lot of fun stuff. Unfortunately, not all of them hit. Some of them did though. So we're going to talk about how to do that last minute climb, so you'll pretty much know what to avoid and what to actually play. So we're going to cover what the best comps are and how to play them. And at the end of the video, we're also going to be addressing some of the Reddit drama that was about me recently. So that should be a fun time there at the end of the video. First up we have is the S tier. Fast 9 still the way to play. You could data check it if you want on teamfight.lol. I like going to champions and then looking at a rough estimate of the win rates, looking at traits, combining them, and then doing a deeper analysis in the Explorer tool. But right now, Sylas and Fast 9 are still the two best comps out there right now, but with the new buffs to Ornn making him a Freljord Wardens is an absolutely incredible comp right now. Ornn, let's take a look at him. This patch right now, he has a 1.62 play rate with 4.07 average placement. Last patch, 16.7. He had 4.23 and 1.03 play rate. So he's getting played a lot more, around 50% more. And he's also getting a 0.2 upgrade in average placement. That's absolutely bonkers busted. Very fun comp to play. You could print infinite artifact items, and he just works really, really well with Braum. I don't think there's been a combination of trait twins at 4 and 5 cost before this. So next up we have in the A tier, we have Ryze Fast 9, still solid. I feel like Ryze is one of the coolest champions that TFT has ever released. It's unfortunate that he was kind of one-dimensional because people only went like 1 or 2 builds of him through most of the set. I thought there'd be more creativity with Ryze, but I think with all the min-maxing and stuff that Ryze just like, yeah, all the cool discovery builds, you can only get them if you get some crazy emblem game. I thought there'd be more cooler builds with Ryze this set personally. But next up we have AD Fast 9. Ahri still very good. I know some people that just one-trick Ahri. Malzahar still good. Noxus Reroll, Jinx Flex, Ionia Yone, Bilgewater, Void, Kaisa, and then Ixtal Fast 9 round everything out. I dropped down Demacia a little bit, like the vertical Demacia that is, because they did nerf Kaisa. So she's just not as good in the latest patch. But B tier's still playable, just not as good as the other ones. But let's get right on into the tier list. We're going to cover Sylas and Fast 9 all in one go because these two are very related comps. They're both AP Fast 9. So if you're ever in a position where 1, you have lots of money, 2, you have AP items at the start, 3, you're kind of win streaking or doing a full win streak. Those are the 3 conditions you need to play both Sylas and Fast 9. Now, the way to differentiate between the two is to look at your specific items. Annie really likes mana items. If you're able to build 2 mana items, go for Annie. I highly recommend not building blue buff early if you get the chance to, because you could use those 2 tiers to build something like Shojin and Adaptive Helm instead to kind of guarantee getting 2 mana items. It's not that blue buff is bad. Blue buff is very good. But tiers are just so important in this comp because almost everyone can use them. Because you also need a tier for something like Void Staff, which is also mandatory on Annie. So if you're not getting too many tiers, Mel's going to be pretty solid. You just need 1 mana item. It could be any of them. And then you need the Void Staff, and that's it. So if you have 2 tiers, Fast 9 going to be a bit easier to play. If you have a lot of them, then Annie's going to be a bit better. So that's going to be how you distinguish between the two. Another difference is what your start is. If you're getting Yordles start, Annie's going to be pretty solid. If you're getting Noxus start, Mel's going to be a little easier. Just because she's also a Noxian, and then she also has a great item holder in LeBlanc. The late game cap is going to be pretty similar though. You want to do Shurima plus Sylas in both builds. Just very solid units. The only difference is that for tanks, Annie likes Tibbers. Tibbers just a very good tank. I mean, it's a 5-cost tank who has all the traits that you're running, so you can't really complain about that. Sylas takes the same melee AP items. And then Renekton, Shyvana, these 2 units can hold your leftovers. On the Mel comp, the tank items just shift from Annie over onto Nasus. You don't really need Renekton. And then Sylas uses the same items. So that's kind of how you play the two. For augments, just get econ augments or item augments for win streaking. Both work. Like there are 2 ways to get to Fast 9. Or there are 2 paths to Rome, as some people like to say. Or many paths. So obviously the best case scenario is getting an econ augment and then win streaking anyways. But that's kind of like hitting the lottery. So what you can do instead is do something more consistent, such as going for item augments to win streak with, and then getting an econ augment later on. I feel like that kind of helps the most for getting to Fast 9 safely and soundly. But you can check out the full guide on the website, bunnymuffins.lol/meta. We have a load of tips. I don't think any other site out there has as big of a write-up as we do. So if you need to learn all the ins and outs and like neat little little tricks, head on over to the website. Gonna be a great time there. Next build up we have is the Freljord build. So this is Freljord Warden. It's going to be Ornn plus Braum. Those are your two main guys. They're just going to be absolute monsters on your team. After that, fill it in with Invoker. Zilean got really good. I mean, he was always good. He just didn't fit in a comp because Invoker was kind of meh throughout most of the set. The reason why Invoker was kind of weak throughout the set was because you normally play around 4 costs. 4 costs Invoker is Lissandra. And whenever you play Lissandra, you have to play Anivia because they're trait twins. I mean, you don't have to, but it makes the most sense to. The issue with that is that it means that Invoker's power is tied to Freljord. So if Freljord's strong, then Invoker's strong. If Freljord is weak, then Invoker is weak. So it wasn't really that great of a time or a set for Zilean because he was mainly tied to Lissandra. I know you could play him with like Kabuko or you could play him with Milio, but those types of flex builds just never really took shape compared to some of the other legendary units. Like how often were we playing Senna, Kindred, Annie, Sylas, things like that over something like Zilean? It was pretty often, right? Fiddlestick, Shyvana, like the list can go on. And again, it wasn't because Zilean's bad. It's just that his traits just weren't that great this set because all the power was tied to Freljord. But this comp is good comp. If you ever get Freljord spat, it makes this exponentially better. All you have to do is drop Sejuani when that happens. But these units complement each other a ton because Kabuko is going to be your main person here. He's going to give you Bruiser to Volibear and give you Invoker to Zilean, which are two legendary units that you're playing around. We already talked about the Ornn and Braum interaction, so all the complementary units, they just focus on your legendaries, which is really crucial for the super late game, right? So that's what makes this comp really, really good and why you add in those specific complementary units. After that, like all the Freljord units are just solid stuff, like Braum, Ornn, automatically running those two, Volibear, Lissandra. I mean, they're just all the 4 and 5 cost units, right? So that's 4 units right there of Freljord. You drop in Anivia for Invoker, and then you drop in Sejuani. And you could also have either Taric with the Freljord emblem, or run something like Ashe worst case scenario. I forgot I already had the emblem in this picture. But another thing to keep in mind when you are playing this comp is that you want a lot of items, but it's also not the end of the world if you don't, depending on if you get Ornn early. If you get Ornn early, you could just start printing items much earlier and pretty much get an extra one. That's like an item augment in itself. But you do have a lot of item holders here. So Braum likes items because he's your main tank. Volibear likes items because he's just a monster if you're running 7 Freljord. And then Zilean and Lissandra are going to be your main carries. But then you also have Ornn, who literally gets bonuses when you put items on him, especially artifacts. So how many sets of items are there? That's 5 sets of items plus you want an emblem. So you're probably not going to be able to realistically itemize everyone whenever you play this comp unless you get to super late game and Ornn prints like 10 items for you. Not actually 10, but a lot. So what you have to do when you play this comp is focus on who you can actually play around. So what units are you hitting? What units can you 2-star? Like if you have a pair of Zileans and 1 Volibear, who are you going to itemize? Obviously, you're going to try to do the Zilean, right? Because you already have 2 Zileans, you only have 1 Volibear. Odds are you're going to find the Zilean 2-star faster than you are going to be able to find Volibear 2-star. So that's kind of how you need to navigate around this. Obviously, you still need a set of tank items plus damage items, so no matter what, Braum's probably going to be itemized, but if you 2-star Ornn early, maybe you swap him onto him. If you, for some reason, 2-star Ornn before your Braum. But that's pretty much how this comp kind of works. But another good news about this team comp is that it's another strong AP comp. If you haven't noticed yet, AP greater than AD in this patch. So it is a bit easier to play around both Zilean and Lissandra instead of something like Volibear. But yeah, very solid comp. Ornn was really cool. Freljord, I always like Freljord. So it's a huge buff to this comp. I might be a little biased in that sense. But compare that to all the other buffs that they did. They did the Aurelion Soul buff. They did a Jhin reroll buff. Like, those aren't as real as something like Ornn. Ornn really just got a lot stronger compared to everyone else. But let's move on into the A tier. We have Ryze Fast 9. Ryze Fast 9 is still very solid. There are like a bunch of different versions you could play him in. Most popular one, probably going to be the Demacia Ionia still. That one revolves around Galio, so you unlock Galio earlier, which is pretty easy to do now because they changed the way the unlocks work. You just need to be level 8 with 8-star levels of Demacia, which isn't that much. That's like 4 units at 2-star. So once you unlock that, you can fit it in. Obviously, you're not playing Ryze till level 9 because you need 3 regions and be level 9 to unlock Ryze. So getting the Galio out for Demacia is pretty easy to do before you get to Ryze. And then Galio, of course, doesn't take up a space on your roster. He sits on your bench, but he still contributes to the Demacia trait, which is really good for Ryze because that means you have an extra roster slot to fit in other units. Main tank going to be Garen or Braum. Backliner, obviously going to be Ryze. It's named after him after all. Leftover items can be on Set, Volibear, or Galio. And then utility item holder can be either your tanks or Lissandra. So you could do either like Morello Void on Lissandra, or you could do Sunfire Ionic in the front line. I do recommend Void Staff though, because Ryze uses it pretty decently. It gives him mana, which is nice, and also he hits the backline a lot, so if you build an Ionic Spark in your front line, it's not going to be affecting the units that Ryze actually hits. So even though Ionic is better than having no armor, so even though having an Ionic Spark is better than having no magic resist shred, it is better to have a Void Staff on Ryze because he just hits units that don't get affected by Ionic Spark. But you can check out the other versions. The Shurima one's pretty good too. I would probably avoid the last two, but they still are playable. Probably like B tier for them. But Demacia and the Shurima one probably going to be the ones to go to right now. Next build up we have is AD Fast 9. I mean, with all the AP running around, like surely AD is less contested. So Lucian Senna and Kindred going to be much easier to hit than some of the AP lines sometimes. Doesn't happen all the time, because a lot of other random comps run these, but if you do get an early Draven drop, you could go for something like this. Draven's just going to farm you infinite gold, and if you have a way to 2-star him, or have a bunch of really good items for him, win streaking is going to be not that difficult. But the main difference between this comp and the AP comps is obviously the items, but also the way you build. Like, Skarner is a good main tank for this comp. There's also a Freljord version where you could run Lucian Kindred still, and then use Braum as a main tank. But you can still run a lot of the generically good units such as Fiddle, Shyvana, and Taric. They pretty much belong in every single comp if you are able to afford them. They also did buff Skarner and Taric, so I don't know how much of a role that's playing right now, but their auras are just a little bit better. So they just get a little bit of extra value in this last patch right now. Next build up we have is Ionia Ahri. If you ever get an Ahri early, you can just hard force this comp. It's really cringe, but reroll is super forceable because if you ever get on a lose streak, which is easier to do than win streaking, you can pretty much just always play Ahri. Like, you could do stuff with Bard. Bard got buffed a bit. He gives you 2 rerolls in stage 3 now instead of 1 whenever you lose a round. So stabilizing with reroll is just a lot easier right now with those recent changes. So stuff like Ahri Kennen's going to be really good. I saw some players, they were just like hard forcing this comp every single game, and they're doing pretty well with it. But the build for Ahri is just going to be the double Nashor's Jeweled Gauntlet. Just gives a lot of mana regen, and the crit synergy works out really well between Jeweled Gauntlet and Nashor's. And then for late game, you could focus on either Set or Yone to kind of round out your team comp. The issue with like itemizing a lot of people in reroll though is that you don't really care that much about it, because for your augments, you really want a lot of econ. You want like one augment that gives you a bunch of rerolls, and another one that gives you maybe like upgraded items such as like Ornn or Radiant items. This comp prefers Radiance because I don't think it uses the Ornn items as well as like melee carries. So since you're focusing on a tank and a AP caster, getting Radiance is a bit more consistent for them. Apart from that, combat augments are also pretty good for this because again, you just want to buff up your 2 reroll units. So you don't need to sweat too much about fully itemizing Set and Yone apart from the free items you get from the game. Next up, you want to have the Transcendence or Spirit Ionia path. That's pretty important to do. There are a bunch of other Ionia comps you could play that take advantage of the other Ionia paths, so you could pay attention to those a bit later. Targon Malzahar, also another solid comp. Same build with the double Nashor's Jeweled Gauntlet. Same buffs with the Bard stuff. I do mention it down here that you do want him as an unlockable. He's not mandatory, but it does make the comp a lot more consistent. And then having solo tank Leona with Stoneplate, pretty solid stuff. Double carry in the backline, Malzahar or Zoe or and then fill the comp out with the rest of random synergies. You need Void for Malzahar. Arcanist is pretty good with Nico and Kog'Maw. It gives your whole team a bunch of extra AP, which is really nice. And then obviously you need Disruptor, Malzahar plus Seraphine, and then you get Vi and Nico as both defenders. And you also get Piltover, which is nice too. So the traits work out really well with this. Despite running like 2 Targon units, you're able to generate like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different traits still, which is pretty nice. Keep in mind, we only have like 7 units out right now because most of the time when you play 3-cost reroll, you don't really get to level 8 that much, especially when you need 3 different units 3-star. It's very expensive. But yeah, just another option you have out there. When you're rerolling, you don't have to hard force yourself into anything. You could kind of wait and see. By the time you hit like stage 3-1 or something like that, like depending on what units you're holding and what units dropped, you'll get a much better idea of which comp works out better for you. Next build up we have is going to be Noxus Reroll. This one's going to be LeBlanc and Darius. Again, AP reroll. That's weird. Both the Fast 9 and rerolls both favor AP. But this one, if you get an early Sion drop, you just insta-unlock LeBlanc. Run her for a bit. reroll for her, get to level 7, get some weird items for Darius. He really likes the Titans. And then super late game, you could play around something like Mel. But yeah, same premise as the other reroll comps. You want at least one reroll augment. If not, it's going to be very difficult to hit everything. And then after that, get some combats, and you're going to be good to go there. Next build up we have is going to be Jinx Flex, another reroll comp. This is going to be the first AD one. She really likes the Rageblade Kraken's combo, just because she's literally built around attack speed. I like this one a lot because you have the Jinx, Warwick, and Vi family buff, which is like unofficial through their abilities. So it's a nice callback to some League of Legends lore, which is kind of nice to have. In this build, I like putting utility items onto the Mundo. He's pretty tanky in general, so just giving him the utility items is quite nice. And then Warwick and Jinx require such specific items that you don't have time to put utility on them. So like Jinx, like, could you replace Deathblade with Last Whisper? You could, but it's going to be a lot better with 3 full damage items. Warwick, he pretty much needs these 3 items. You don't really have space for anything on him for utility. So just putting them on Mundo makes this a lot easier to do. After that, make sure you're running Gunslinger for Jinx and Quick Striker for Warwick. It doesn't have to be Lucian, Senna, and Kindred in the mid game because obviously you don't get those early on. But it could be something as simple as like maybe like Graves TF and Alawi works out pretty decently in the early game if you ever get these guys unlocked early or like you're using them, because you get Bruiser with Mundo with Alawi, Gunslinger with Graves and Jinx, and then Quick Striker with TF and Warwick. But overall, pretty solid comp. You play it with the same Bard stuff. Bard got buffed, so I would recommend playing it. Like, it says optional, but like since it got buffed, maybe not optional anymore. Next build up we have is the Ionia Yone comp. This one plays around just like level 8. I think this is the only level 8 comp we've looked at so far. Yone uses a bunch of weird items, like the Titan's BT is a classic combo, but then the Rage Blade's a little random, but he likes auto-attacking, so that's kind of why you build it on him. But pretty much if you get Ionia, if you get anything that tells you to go Ionia, this comp is going to be a good comp to play. This comp is good if you just get Ionia's start, and if you get something like the XP ones, it makes a lot of sense just to use that extra XP to kind of level up with. Instead of focusing on the reroll angles. It's also going to be a bit item dependent on what you do. If you get good Yone items, like obviously go him, but if you do get good Ahri items, even if you get a bad Ionia path for Ahri, you could still go Ahri. Like if you have the items, it's going to be more important than whatever path you have. But it's just another option out there if you do get one of the early augments that help you fast 8 a lot, more so than do a reroll comp and if you have Ionia. So just another option there. Bilgewater, interesting comp. Not my cup of tea personally. I find Bilgewater too like confusing to play. Sometimes when I play TFT, I don't want to have to use my whole capacity of my brain. Sometimes I just want to autopilot, and when you play Bilgewater, you can't really autopilot. So if you're like wanting to be active the entire game, then Bilgewater is going to be the perfect comp for you. If not, I would skip it. But the basis of the comp is just getting early Bilgewater really early. I know that sounds kind of redundant, but it really is true. Because the earlier you get a lot of Bilgewaters, the earlier you get a lot of Silver Serpents. And then with the Silver Serpents, you can use that to just completely snowball the game by getting all the Bilgewater items, getting upgrades, and things like that. So endgame going to be built around Misfortune and Lucian. You could add in Senna, or you could add in Kindred also, but I like focusing around Lucian a bit more. Your early MF items are just going to be transferred onto Lucian, so they use like the same build, so it's easier to build around Lucian than it is for Kindred. And then up in the front line, Tahm Kench, he just needs one of the tank Bilgewater items, and then he becomes unstoppable. That, in addition to a bunch of mana tank items, going to make him really, really powerful. Always reposition your Tahm Kench every round. Put him in front of their weakest tank with items. That way you get to print infinite items with him, because he's not going to be able to realistically kill their main tank, but their off tank definitely can do that many, many times. Next build up we're going to have is going to be the Void Kaisa build, another fast 8 build. You could also play around with Baron if you just happen to get Win Out. Win Out augment is just mandatory for Baron, but Kaisa's overall pretty solid. AD or AP builds both work. You want to play her around with Ziggs. Ziggs is pretty good right now. And then you could do the 4 Juggernaut frontline. That's going to be Sin, Shyvana, Cho'Gath, and Swain. And then your main tank can either be Rift Herald or Singed. But yeah, this comp becomes a lot better if you can reach Baron, but it doesn't happen that often. I wouldn't really play around it if I were you, unless you know from the very start that it's like double econ. But playing around like the level 8, level 9 version is doable. There's just probably better things to go out there, including all the other comps in the higher up in the A tier. Next up we have is Ixtal Fast 9. Ixtal's still pretty solid, but it runs into the same issue as Bilgewater. Like, you need to use your full mental capacity whenever you play this, and sometimes you just don't have the energy for that. because compared to playing like any of the other comps, like they're just so much easier that you're really just not playing the same game when you go for one of these. So unless you're like super tryharding or you want to get some crazy Ixtal cash out by the end of the set or before the end of the set, that's going to be my main reason for playing this comp. But apart from that, if you're trying to do a last minute climb, it's best to play some of the other comps out there. That's going to be it for the A tier. But before we end the set, I do want to respond to one of the Reddit posts about me recently. Some guy was saying that like, oh, I did well with Viego, but I say Viego's not that great. In my opener guide, I put him in the D tier. And in the current comps list, I have him somewhere in, I think he's B tier right now for Shadow Owls. Just because you play something and it works out, it doesn't mean it's going to be the best thing ever. Because there are like 50 billion other comps you can play. For example, in that specific patch, like going Fast 9 or going one of the reroll angles is just infinitely better than going for Viego. And keep in mind, like, I list out Viego as one of the really good beginner comps. Like, I have Shadow Owl Kalista over here, which is built from Viego. And the reason why I have that is because when you play something like Viego, it makes your game plan really, really, really straightforward and easy. It's like the opposite of playing Ixtal or Bilgewater. Like, I say that these are really hard comps. Something like the ones I list out over here in the beginner comps, these are really easy comps. So if you are prone to making mistakes, which I am too, I'm not perfect either, you know? But if you are prone to making mistakes, playing easier comps just avoids that. So even if the overall power level of these comps might be a bit lower than something else, you'll probably climb harder if you play some of these beginner comps compared to some of the S and A tier comps. Okay, maybe not the S tiers, but definitely the A tiers. And again, the reason why is because you just don't make as many mistakes, and sometimes that's just all you need to do in TFT. This person also says that I put Bloodthirster as a D tier item in my opener guide and put Adaptive Helm in the S tier. A reason why a lot of people might think like this is because Adaptive Helm is not a best in slot item for a lot of units. In fact, it might be one of the worst items for a lot of units in the endgame boards. And because of that, it gives this misconception that Adaptive Helm is quote-unquote bad, but it's not. But it's not bad just because Blue Buff is better. Blue Buff takes up 2 tiers, and when you build Blue Buff, you're most likely playing AP. When you're playing AP, you probably want a Void Staff, so you probably want to build one random mana item plus the Void Staff with the 2 tiers, because you're not guaranteed to get tiers later on in the game. So building something like Blue Buff, when you go into the Explorer tool, I guarantee you a lot of the mana users, Blue Buff might be the best mana item on all of them. But again, the issue comes up when I don't get Pandora's items every single game, you know? So here we see on Lissandra, Shojin's at 4.25, Adaptive Helm's at 4.0, but then Blue Buff's at 3.93. Like, does that mean you should try to build Blue Buff every single game? Because if you're going Lissandra, you should try to build the best average placement items, right? But unless you have Pandora's items, probably not, because again, you might need the tiers for other things. Another great thing about Adaptive Helm that I think a lot of beginners don't fully understand is that it's adaptive. So throughout the early game, you could put it on either your tank or your damage dealer. That flexibility in the early game will lead to a lot more HP saved throughout the game. And because of that, even though you don't have the best items or like the best in slot items on your carries, you'll be like 1 level higher than everyone else. Or maybe instead of having a 1-star 5 cost, you'll have a 2-star 5 cost because you're able to greed out one more round to get more gold because you had a higher health total from stage 2 and 3. So that's kind of why the opener guide kind of lists these out. I'll probably do an item guide sometime in the next set explaining why certain items work out better in different parts of the game and why an item is good and why an item is bad. But I just found it funny that this person says that I'm trying to make people lose. But again, Adaptive Helm is good because it's adaptive. Like, I don't know what to tell people, you know? And in every one of my videos, I do talk about adaptive and the strength of it, about why it's so good, because you could put it on either your tank or your carry in the early and mid game. I feel like I've said this so much that sometimes I don't even want to mention it because I don't know if people are tired of me saying the same thing every time. Next, with Bloodthirster. Bloodthirster is a solid item in the late game or in the mid game. The reason why it's not good early game is because it gives you no stats, but it's kind of like the whipped cream on a sundae. Bloodthirster is good because it gives you lifesteal, and it gives you a shield based on your percent health. However, in the early game, you don't have full items on the unit that holds Bloodthirster, so that means you don't have that many stats. Bloodthirster is good when you have a lot of stats, so if it's your only item, it's not going to be that great. Next, a lot of the units that use Bloodthirster are going to be stuff like Briar and Kiana, and both of those units are Slayers. So they already have innate lifesteal, so they don't need even more in the early game. What you'd rather have is maybe some damage items so that you could have more stuff to lifesteal from. Like, it's a very simple math equation. Like, in the early game, let's say you deal 100 damage. If you have 10% lifesteal, you only heal 10 life. But over time, as you add more and more items to your units, they might deal 200 or 300 damage. Then your lifesteal becomes 20 or 30 life. But in the beginning, when you're not really dealing that much damage, when you have the choice between 10 lifesteal or doing 100 more damage, like obviously the 100 more damage is going to be more worth it. Obviously these numbers are not to scale, but it's just for illustration purposes right now. But that's kind of where I'm at with this post. Like, I'm not saying like we should harass a person or whatever, but that's kind of just a thought process behind why something might be good and why something might be bad. And another thing is that, like, if you play like a C tier comp, like, you could definitely win with these. Like, I'm not saying you can't win with these. I guarantee you we could look at the worst legendary in the game, who is apparently Zehen, at 5.05. But if we go to the Explorer tool, we can type in Zehen and then probably find some games of him where he gets first place. And keep in mind, the match history here is generally going to be Master Plus. But we look at this and we're like, oh, first place, third place, second place. Let's not look at this one. Let's not look at this one. Let's not look at the other ones. Let's not look at any of the games where you're trying to go for Zehen and don't hit him. Like, yeah, you could average something in the high 2 point whatevers, but that might not be reflective of how strong Zehen actually is. Because obviously, Riot Games is balancing the game, and they do want every champion to have some situation where they're good. It's just a question of whether that happens in 1 out of every 5 games or 1 out of every 50 games. So something like Zehen might be 1 out of every 50, whereas something like Annie might be something like 1 out of every 3 games. So that's kind of how the tier list is kind of approached and stuff, and like all my guides are approached. It's more from like a what's good in general perspective rather than listing out every single situation that could happen in the world. It's kind of like that meme where people say like, oh, TFT players are smarter than everyone else, but then someone raises their hand, they're like, I know a Valorant player that's smarter than a TFT person. Of course this is a joke, right? But just because you can point out an exception doesn't make it the truth, you know? So that's kind of where I'm at with that, but hopefully set 17 should be something really, really fun. I'm going to be coming out with a lot of guides that hopefully make it so that situations like this never happen again, because after their release and people watch them, they'll know why things are in certain places. But that's going to be it for me today. Hopefully you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all in the next one.